What's up guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Morphine, and in this part of the guide we are going to talk about some very important points such as gear, abilities, and ship upgrades. Now we're going to break things down into smaller little bits as we go along. We're going to talk about every single thing that is important to us, and the pacing of the run will be dictated by how good our gear is, how good our abilities are, and ship upgrades. All these things are going to play a very important role in the speedrun, and I hope you guys pay very close attention because we're going to be going over a lot of important stuff here. So first we're going to talk about gear. So what kind of gear will we be expecting in the speedrun? Well, gear is extremely important, and it dictates the entire pace of the speedrun. It's what is going to give us our damage output, our survivability, and in order to do those things, we have to pick and choose what type of gear is the most important to us. So first, let's go over the difference between epics and legendaries. So they're both important in their own way, but if you're looking at gear as a whole, epics are so much more powerful. The reasoning behind that is because we can modify epics way more than we can with legendaries. Legendaries will give you a specific stat depending on what legendary we're talking about, and that stat can't really be modified. With epics, however, we can go to the blacksmith and find epics that have different stats, and we can utilize those to build a badass piece of gear that will carry us throughout the run. So that's kind of the beginner trap of Odyssey. When people think and look at pieces of gear, they automatically think legendaries are just better. In some cases, when you play the game casually, sure, that can be true, but for a speedrun, epics are definitely the way to go. So since we don't use legendaries, what are they good for? Well, we can get into legendary engravings for one. Legendary engravings are so important. There are some legendary engravings that are so important, you cannot pass them up. They are just that powerful. So if we take that legendary engraving and now put it on a better modified epic piece of gear, we've pretty much created the most powerful item in the game. And that's what we'll be getting into here in a second. I'm going to show you the breakdown of my entire set of gear and why each piece plays such an important role to our entire gear set. So this is how our ideal inventory is going to look. Now, not everything here is best in slot. I'm only missing a couple pieces here and there, but most of it is basically built for the speedrun. A lot of it is fine-tuned, and this is the necessary pieces of gear that you'll need for the speedrun. So I'm going to break down every single piece of gear and how important it is and what stats that we can put on this piece of gear that will make you do insane amounts of damage. So first, let's start with our helmet. So here, we're going to break down each piece of gear with the stat of importance and how much that it's important to the entire build of the speedrun. So every piece of gear is going to either have warrior damage, hunter damage, or assassin damage. So right off the bat, we are a hunter. We use a bow. We do that to keep a distance, not to mention the abilities that hunters have take out multiple targets in like one shot. Almost every single time. So this is really important to have hunter damage because it's going to boost our overall damage. So every piece of gear should have hunter damage. The next important stat is critical chance and critical damage at full life, or while full life rather. Why is that stat so important? Well, if you look, let's see if I can find another piece here. So if you look, the max stat for crit damage on its own is 50%. Alright? So the max damage for crit damage while in full life is 100%. So if you notice, that's like double the amount of damage. So being on full life and staying on full life and not taking damage is going to maximize your damage throughout the entire run. So those stats are extremely important. We're looking for maximizing our crit damage as much as possible and our crit chance. Crit chance we should see around 80 or 90% with epics. Like, we want to make sure that we're critting almost every hit to ensure that we're going to do maximum damage at all times. So each piece is built separately from every other piece in your inventory. So each piece will have its own uniqueness in a way. So I'm going to go over every single piece and what you can possibly build there for the best in slot and what you should try to be building towards. So for your helmet, obviously hunter damage is number 1 on the top of the list there. So what you can get on here, this is almost perfectly built. However, we're missing one key stat on this. So you're looking for obviously crit chance while on full health, because that's super important. We need as much crit chance as possible. So that is like the number 1 stat below hunter damage, which hunter damage is pretty much a given anyways. So crit chance is pretty much the most important stat on this item. Next would be crit damage. Now, I haven't fully gotten the upgrade for the engraving yet for crit damage, but either get that on the gear before you engrave, or you'll take the next best option, which is headshot damage. Either of those can be engraved. So you're looking for hunter damage, critical chance while full health, crit damage, and headshot damage. Those are the best in slots for your helmet. All right, now we're going to move on to our gloves. So right here, this is actually best in slot, period. Like, this is the best gloves that I can possibly get. So we see our hunter damage. The next, and I chose to engrave this, but you can actually find this on the item as well, is crit damage while on full life. Now, it doesn't matter if you engrave it or not. The only difference is you'll have to go and upgrade that engraving all the way max, which is 100% in this case. I'm only at 90%, so we're working our way there. But that's the next best stat that we need. Next would be crit damage, which it came on the item, so it's already maxed out because we have it at level 93. And then the last one is kind of up to you, but I chose to get 10% all damage because it's giving us 10% to everything. Doesn't matter what kind of damage we do. So that to me is the last stat that we need for the best in slot for that piece of gear. So this is how it should look, or something of this variable. If you can switch around like crit damage on the engraving rather than crit damage while on full life, if the crit damage on full life is already on the piece of gear and you can engrave the crit damage, that's fine too. All right, we're gonna move down to our chest piece now. So the chest piece is built differently than the rest of the gear. It's actually the one piece of gear that we don't really get all of our important stats on. However, it's kind of like, it's up to you really what you want to put on your chest piece. But the only stat that's really important, actually 2 stats rather, is the critical damage and the poison damage. And I'll get into poison in a little bit too. We'll talk about that when we start getting to our bow. So I chose to take health on this piece of gear because we need a little bit of life so we don't die in like 2 hits. It's really up to you what you want to put there. Life is not the most important stat. If you're very good at dodging and avoiding attacks, then you could put something like elemental buildup, or you can even find some pretty awesome legendary engravings for your chest piece as well. Like if you fall in battle, you get picked up automatically and it's like a 3-minute cooldown or something like that. There's something like that that you can put on your chest piece as well that's extremely important. But I don't have that engraving, unfortunately. But if you do find something that you like, then put it on there by any means. But this is how I like to build mine. So this is what I expect for my chest piece. All right, let's move on to our legs, or waist rather. So this is almost best in slot. The only thing that's missing is the hunter damage. Unfortunately, I found this with assassin damage on it, and I need to find one with hunter damage, but this is complete best in slot right here. So you need hunter damage, you need the critical damage while in full life, the crit chance, and headshot damage would either be the engraving, or like I said, you can flip-flop any of those around if you have something different and you need to engrave one of those stats on there. That's what we'll be expecting on our waist. And then finally our boots for the gear side. We have hunter damage. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Sorry, I was a little farther up. This is complete best in slot as well, just like our gloves. However, our boots is one of the most important pieces because we can not only put critical chance while in full life, but we can put crit damage while in full life too. This piece of gear gives us a crazy amount of damage. So it looks like this. We need a hunter damage, crit chance while in full life, crit damage while in full life, and then my last choice was to put 10% damage to all. That is kind of what I was expecting to put on there. That's very good. Obviously, you can switch the 10% all damage for something else if you feel like it's more beneficial. That's not really that beneficial. The biggest thing that you need is the crit chance and the crit damage. All right, so finally we will move to our weapons. Give me 1 second. All right, there we go. So our first legendary that is extremely important is the Atlantean Blade. Why do we keep this legendary? We keep it for the armor penetration. Armor penetration is huge for our damage. Not to mention, it does have good stats on it. It already has crit damage and hunter damage. So really, it's kind of built for our build already. Like, we don't need to do anything different to make it any better. Honestly, there really isn't much different weapons out there that's different from this. So this is already a good weapon. So if you actually go out and get this, which it's not really that hard to go get, it's going to be like one of the best in slot pieces of gear for you. So this is definitely required. And then I threw poison damage on that because that's pretty much the only engraving that we can put on that besides a couple other things. But poison damage is sort of important in the build as well. So we have an epic weapon. Now this can be a two-hander or one-hander, it doesn't matter. As long as it has stats like this is what you need. Now, I'll go over this engraving too, because this is the most important engraving in the game. So right away, we need to go out and find the Falx of Olympus spear. That is the engraving for all engravings. Like, we needed that for any percent in the old category. It is what carries your damage and makes you that much more of a badass. So the Falx of Olympus spear, once you find it and you get its engraving, it'll increase your damage by 100%, but your health is capped at 25%. So the problem with that is you're only a couple hits from death. So you really have to try and not die in a couple hits, because it could really be problematic. But it's such a good engraving that you cannot pass it up. So in the speedrun, I am saying that you have to be good at trying to dodge. Like, that's going to be a survival mechanic that you will have to learn. If you take a lot of hits, you're going to have to practice with dodging a lot and trying not to take so much damage. And I do mean dodging. Blocking is not really that beneficial. Dodging is way better. All right, so we're going to move on to our last piece of gear, which is our bow. All right, so we choose the Achilles bow, and the Achilles bow is another really important legendary. So it gives us automatically on our engraving 20% damage with devastating abilities, or devastating shot ability, I'm sorry. So that is like our devastating shot is like our single target ability. So we need an engraving like that to make us do more damage. It's really important. And it already comes with hunter damage and critical chance, so it's pretty important. And the last engraving that we put on the item is basic arrows become poison arrows. Alright, and the last thing that we'll come to is our bow. Now, we choose the Achilles bow because of the legendary stat that already comes on it. Now, it gives us 20% damage with devastating shot, which is extremely important because devastating shot is like our single target ability for bosses. It does so much damage, and getting that extra 20% damage on it is super beneficial. And the benefit, it comes with 25% hunter damage maxed out and critical chance, which is really important. We need both those stats. So the last engraving that we'll talk about that's a legendary engraving is the basic arrows become poison arrows. Now, this is super important. So what engraving is this? It's the Fanged Bow. And the Fanged Bow is a pretty easy legendary to find because it's part of the main missions that you'll do to get this engraving. You might overpass it because it's hidden behind a statue, but it's there and it's super important. So I keep talking about poison, but what's so important about poison? So poison is so important because of two factors. One, it actually weakens the damage of your enemies, which is pretty beneficial. But the biggest reason why we take poison is for the armor penetration that it gives you. Poison gives you natural armor penetration in this game. So stacking that on top of the Atlantean Blade's already 30% armor penetration is gigantic. It will literally allow us to shred through enemies. So having these two engravings paired up with each other, you'll just decimate the entire battlefield. It is so important to get this. So this is how our inventory screen is going to look. Now, I did say that there are legendaries that you can build, and personally, I don't build them, but you can get the War Hero set from doing the Cultist. Now, that set has a very important engraving on it, but we can't use it for any pieces of gear, only for that set. That engraving allows us to shoot through shields. So the reason why that's important is because cultists have shields that sometimes are hard to shoot over. Sometimes they're hard to get headshots when the enemy's holding the shield up. Not to mention when you're on the battlefield and you're using a multi-shot, some enemies will actually block your multi-shot because they already have their shield up. So that engraving is really important. However, I choose not to take it because you lose a large portion of damage because of that. You actually cut your damage in half by choosing that set. So personally, if you're going to start the speedrun at level 50, that set will be beneficial to you off the start. But in game, I would definitely recommend using epics. Epics are the way to go. There's what is going to get you to 90% crit chance and almost 700% chance of critical damage. So that is huge, and that is definitely what I would build towards if you guys are looking for a speedrunning set to finish this game fast. Alright, so next we're going to talk about abilities. Now, I've marked the abilities in 3 different categories. The first category being our necessary abilities, the abilities that we are going to need the entire time through the speedrun. Situational abilities, which are used in certain parts of the run in case something happens, and passive abilities, abilities that will just be sitting in the background that will benefit us heavily during the speedrun. So let's go through this. Now, first thing I'm going to mention, let's try to get our spear level to level 6. So this is really important. We need to make sure that we have the maximum amount of adrenaline segments. That's going to make the speedrun go a lot faster. We need to make sure that we have adrenaline on us at all times, especially during certain parts of the speedrun where we have to use adrenaline to kill enemies fast so we can get through a split faster. Alright, so let's talk about our necessary abilities. Now, there's only 3 necessary abilities in this game. Number 1, Devastating Shot. This ability is insane. It's going to be our single target damage ability. We just absolutely destroy everything. So if we look, it deals 400% hunter damage, but it doubles up with a fully charged arrow. So in some cases, using this fully charged will completely kill a boss in like one shot. It's ridiculous how much damage it does. Next is multi-shot. So multi-shot can shoot up to 8 targets at once. So when we get into nation battles during the speedrun, we're going to be using multi-shot almost all the time. While there isn't a leader, or if we're not fighting the mercenary that spawns, we're just going to be spamming multi-shot as much as possible and ensuring that we can kill as many enemies as fast as possible. Multi-shot will be used in a lot of different areas. And in fact, you can actually use multi-shot to instantly shoot a target without aiming at it. It's crazy. So like, let's say there's a wolf bothering you and he's putting you in combat. So we want to make sure that wolf dies really quick. So we multi-shot so we can just completely kill it without even aiming anywhere near it. It's fantastic how important that is. Arrow Mastery is kind of a passive, but it's also a necessary ability as well. So during the speedrun, we have to use fire arrows and explosive arrows. Using those two will actually save a lot of time during certain splits. Getting that to rank 3 to unlock those arrows is extremely important. Not to mention death arrows too. Death arrows are really important as well because we need them to kill certain hard to kill enemies. Those will increase the overall damage of your hunter damage. Ghost arrows is another necessary ability as well. We only use it maybe once or twice through the speedrun, but we need it to save time on certain splits. This will allow you to shoot through walls, so you can be at certain angles and just take out a nation leader without even having to go into the house or fort wherever he is. So this is an extremely important ability as well. Alright, so let's talk about the only situational ability. Actually, I'll talk about two of them because there's one that I don't use, but you can use if you'd like. So the first situational ability is Vanish. If you are being followed by a bunch of enemies or you have to get out of a bad situation and get yourself out of combat quickly, Vanish is a good way to do it. Upgrading this to rank 3 can be good. 10 seconds of blinding light towards the enemy is really important. But I only put a couple points into it because 8 seconds is long enough for me. So Vanish is really good just to get out of combat quickly. So you want to use it and try to run a large distance away so the enemies instantly lose aggro, and then once you hit outside their combat range, you'll just completely get out of combat and you can continue doing your things as normal. And the next one I'll talk about, I don't use it personally because I don't have to, but some people can use this if they'd like. Battle Cries of Ares is a very strong ability. The reason why it's so strong, not only does it increase your overall damage, but if you are going to die, you can use this to stop death. So you can use it as an oh shit button in case, you know, oh my god, I'm about to die. You can hit it right away and then it'll completely take away the scariness of dying. So that's a very good situational one too. You can definitely use it if you'd like. That is entirely up to you. I'll talk about another thing real quick before we move on to passives. So if you see my one key right here doesn't have an ability on it because we spam the one key a lot when we go through conversations. So if you put Vanish or an attack ability on that one key, you might accidentally hit it and you'll hit a civilian or a guard next to you, putting yourself in combat and losing time. So I completely take my abilities off that one key. I don't like it there. It really loses a lot of time. So I actually would recommend putting it on your 2, 3, and 4 key. That would be a huge recommendation for me to do that if you don't want to lose time on certain pieces. If you're good at spamming your one key and you can stop after every conversation, which is very unlikely because we're spamming it a lot, then by all means you can do that. That is up to you. Okay, let's get into passives. So the first passives that are extremely important is Weapon Master. So Weapon Master increases your warrior damage by 40%. This may not be that important because we're not using warrior damage a lot. However, it does increase our critical strike chance by 10% with all weapons. So that's a free 10% crit chance by putting 3 points into this. That is extremely important and that is extremely necessary. So we'll go to Gear Master next. Gear Master increases our armor, which is just a defensive property that we'll need so we don't die in one hit. It increases our armor by 90% and reduces range damage by 10%. So that's huge. That is awesome. Like, that's exactly what we need to not die in one shot. I count overpower attacks as a passive because it just gives us the overpower ability, but we don't necessarily use it that much. It's kind of just hanging in the background until we actually need it. We only use overpowering attacks during fist segments in the game. So in the Olympics, when we have to use our fist, we'll use it there. When we're trapped in the cage in the last split of the game, we'll use it there. But for the most part, it's not really used that often. So let's go over here to the hunter part. Archery Master is insane as well. It increases our hunter damage by 40%, headshot damage by another additional 40%. So if you're getting a headshot, that's an additional 80% damage increased just by this one passive. That's awesome. Also, when you're using a hunter ability, it doesn't consume normal arrows. So using multi-shot, you consume only one arrow other than all freaking 8 arrows that you're shooting out. That is awesome. Also, if your adrenaline segments are partially drained, it will refill outside of combat. That is huge. So if we're outside of combat and we use one of our adrenaline segments, but we have another one just kind of hanging out there that's not quite full yet, it'll refill and give you another adrenaline segment. So if you need to use that quickly, it's very great in situational parts of the game. Also, slowing down time while you're in midair is not really that beneficial, although we have to take 3 points in Archery Master in order to make it useful. So that's what we'll have to do. Talking about another overpower ability, we'll talk about Overpower Bow Strike. It's another one that we don't use as much. There's only a couple spots in the run that we will use it, but it's still very beneficial. So we'll take that and max that out as well. Talking about another really important passive, Shadow Assassin. So Shadow Assassin is not very useful in half of the sense. We don't really need to increase assassination and knockout damage by 40%. That's not what we're here for. We're here for the crit damage increased by 50%. This passive is giving us 50% crit damage with 3 points. That is huge. We need that. Those points are extremely necessary for increasing our overall damage. And finally, we'll talk about these 2 poison passives. So we're only going to grab venomous attacks so we can unlock poison mastery. Honestly, I don't even put this on my bar because we already have the fanged bow engraving. So venomous attacks is actually kind of useless. We don't need to activate poison. We automatically have poison on at all times. So because of that, we take poison mastery. So poison mastery increases our poison buildup by 60%. So the target becomes poisoned a lot faster. Once intoxicated, the poison damage and weakened effect is increased by 25%. So that is huge. That's the reason why poison is so important in this build, and poison damage is so important in this build. It's increasing our overall damage when the target is poisoned. That is extremely necessary, and that's what we need for the build. It all kind of like molds together once you kind of put all of the elements of the build together. It's fantastic. So the last thing we're going to talk about is mastery points. Now, mastery points is huge for the build. Once you've kind of cleared all these abilities and you've gotten all the ones that you need for the build, you're going to get extra ability points, and you don't need any extra abilities here. All this stuff is kind of useless. We don't need it. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to dump it into mastery points. So I'm going to go over the most important ones. It's after you get the most important ones, it's kind of up to you where you want to put them first. All the major talking points here are important, but your progression after getting the most important ones are up to you. So we're going to go into the assassin mastery, and we are going to try to max out crit chance while full health first and crit damage while full health first. These are extremely important. Those are going to help carry our damage a lot. We need crit chance as much as possible, and getting an extra 10% crit is amazing. As well as the 50% crit damage while in full life, that is also amazing. Alright, we'll go into the hunter tree, and of course we'll try to get crit chance and crit damage as much as possible. That's up to you, which one you want to grab first. Generally, I grab crit chance first because it's more important. We need to crit as much as possible, so I grab those first. Next, it's up to you what you want to put it in. Personally, I would say hunter damage, maybe headshot damage. You can go down here and increase engraving damage, like devastating shot damage. Everything else, damage with hunter abilities is good. Everything else, though, is not really that useful. I don't even think there's anything in the warrior tree that would be useful. Basically, that's all we really need out of that, is we want to focus on these guys first before we start focusing on anything else. Those are kind of like the most important things, and that's really all you need to know about masteries. There's really nothing else to it. Okay, so last and most importantly, our ship upgrades. So, in a New Game Plus run, we don't take lieutenants with us. which is sad because lieutenants are a very important part of the ship page. So we kind of have to just live without taking them. I don't even keep them on after I finish a run. There's really no point in having them. So we're going to talk about the progression of our ship upgrades. So first of all, we're going to talk about the important ones, the sort of important ones, and the ones that we kind of can wait on later on throughout the game. So the most important ones that we need is arrow volley, javelin throw, arrow damage, javelin damage, and ram. Those are all going to dictate how much damage we do to ships and how much damage we can take out, or how much damage that we can output, sorry. Fire Brazers would come next. We do want a lot of fire damage because fire damage is huge against ships. So trying to get this kind of matched into that category as well is sort of important. I would put it in the necessary kind of category there. But I tend to kind of gravitate around these guys first. These guys are really important, and these guys need to be maxed out as fast as possible. I'm still missing a couple upgrades here and there, but getting them to the legendary status, even if you're missing the last upgrade here, is still going to be very powerful. The next one that I would say is sort of important is hull. You need to upgrade your hull just a little bit to give you more armor and health so you don't die during shipping segments. That would be terrible. And rowing stamina. Rowing stamina is great, not necessarily necessary, but we need it in a certain sense. We need to make sure that we have enough stamina so we can ram ships. And not to mention, if we cleave a ship, we'll get some rower stamina back. So that's really important. It's not classified as far as much as these guys for damage, but it's still in its own category of necessary. Now, the one that I always get last and that I don't necessarily care for is crew armor. Crew armor is not that great. Bracing damage reduction, fire damage reduction, fire buildup while bracing. Those can really wait till the end. I don't brace at all when I'm doing my speedrun. Bracing wastes time. We have enough armor, we have enough life for our ship. We don't need to brace. Bracing actually slows you down and causes you to wait in an animation without throwing your spears and your arrows. I usually tend to wait till the last minute to get these. This will help stop damage a little bit, but increasing your hull more will be more useful than taking crew armor. But that is the basics and kind of the whole setup of the ships. There's really nothing to it. You really want to try to upgrade everything, but getting those necessary points down first is what's going to help you get through the speedrun a lot faster. So before I end this part of the guide, I want to answer some questions that you guys have had about our gear and some concerns that you guys have had. So the biggest concern that people have is, why do we grab damage while on full life, crit damage, crit chance, when we're not actually on full life? Well, we're still considered on full life. The Falks of Olympus Spear reduces our entire HP pool down to 25%. We're not capped down, well, we are capped down there, but we're not pushed down to 25% at a full life bar. So we are still considered at 100%. So getting damage while on full life instead of low life is the way to go. It's the only way that we'll actually get benefits from those stats. A lot of people are concerned about, how do we get gear so quickly? Well, there's actually a Blacksmith Exploit that you can do, and it's built into the game, and it's not that hard to do. All you have to do is go to your local blacksmith. Before you reach him, make sure you make a quick save point by hitting F5 or whatever your quick save button is. Then talk to the blacksmith, check what he has. If he has no good pieces of gear, you can simply hit F9 or a quick load, and it'll restart the blacksmith with a whole new set of gear. So you can keep playing the blacksmith until you start finding items. Once you click the blacksmith and you buy an item from the blacksmith, you'll have to move on to a different blacksmith and do the process all over again. but that is the quickest way to get gear. It is the easiest way too, and it won't take you that much time. To be honest, I've gotten my full set of gear just about over an hour of time playing the Blacksmith. So honestly, it didn't take much time to do it all. I know this part was long, guys. This guide has definitely taken a lot of time to put together, but I wanted to make sure that we covered all the important parts with gear and covered the major talking points with our abilities in our ship page. A lot of things people have asked me over the past couple months, and I just wanted to cover the most important things for you guys so you guys don't get lost. Once again, guys, we're going to pick up the next guide video later on. We're going to start covering more important things that you guys will need to continue the speed run. As always, I'm Morphine, and I'm glad that you guys have joined me for another speedrun guide. I will see you in the next video.